Hello. I haven't done a Fountain of Comfort stream in a while. I should do more. I plan to do more. I hope to do more. And I hope that other people involved in Fountain of Comfort may want to do more. Um, hey, Laura, how you doing? Wow, Jeff, long time no see. How have you been? Um, is this related to gender affirmation or uh, affirmation in general, or both? Yes. And there's our the chairman of the, or is it president? Are you chairman or president? I forget. Of the board of directors. Um, well, kind of, yeah. I have I have Fountain of Comfort. What you call it? Specific countdown. Um, I got a pimple, which I should stop picking at. Okay, so um, affirmation: good, bad, neutral. Um, I don't know if how many of you are old enough to remember um, daily affirmations with Jack Handy. It was a joke on Saturday Night Live for a while, which was hilarious. Um, because and there's a lot of people who practice affirmations, right? Um, they will, and the question becomes: is an affirmation a good thing? And I was listening to some show, and there was an ad, and the Jeff remembers. Um, and the guy who was reading the ad was like, "Yeah, I go to therapy, and when I go to therapy, I feel good." I was like, "Ooh, you must not. You either don't need therapy, or you don't have a very good therapist." So there, I'm working on the Fountain of Comfort model of care, and actually, this stream was kind of, if people want to jump on who actually know stuff or want to discuss this stuff, preferably people with some sort of knowledge and expert excuse me, expertise about psychology, um, please do. The So the question becomes, well, is it a good thing to say, I'm okay, so you're okay, you're okay just as you are? Well, that's kind of saying, is it good to tell someone to eat more? And the um, oh, Deep Thoughts by Jack Andy. Yeah, daily affirmations. It was a thing, but it. I mean, do you tell Do you tell people generally you should eat more? No. Do you tell most Americans they should eat more? No. Do you tell some people that they should eat more? Yes. And are the people who are suffering from malnutrition more likely to be talking to certain types of doctors? Yes. Um, and so, well, let's see what Mark says. Psychology is very individualistic. I doubt that was a problem with Freud, but like the corruption of Plato's cave, everything is wrongly focused. Um, Psychoanalysis and really the type of psychodynamic intervention that psychoanalysts do are good for some people for some time, right? Um, I have never heard of a Rollo Mai. Sorry. And but if he's an existentialist, it's probably bad. Oh, Stuart Smalley, that's who I'm. Yeah, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. Um, actually, one of the Ryans who's getting his master's in psychology, I forget his last name, not Ryan Lewis, the other one. Now I'm gonna have to look it up. Ryan Rogers. Um, so he talks about reality therapy, which I understand what he means, but the actual reality therapy I looked into. Not a huge fan of that as a methodology. So several things about affirming someone. First of all, the affirmation has to be true. And this is one place where I think postmodernists get, especially as postmodernist psychologists, people who don't. So, okay, there's real postmodernism, which is like intellectually intellectually defended by smart people and rationalized, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's how things actually in real life end up being put into practice by therapists, right? It's very nice to talk about a theory. It's another thing to believe that well, I would say Lacan is the postmodernist psychologist, although I haven't read him. I know Zizek is a big fan, and I know Peterson respects Zizek. But any case, the question becomes, right, is this a method that is being used by your average counselor? I remember when Matt Walsh was talking to Jordan Peterson, he asked, okay, how do I find a good therapist? And um, Peterson's answer was, find yourself a PhD from a good research university. Yeah, good luck. Good luck finding yourself a PhD from a good research university who takes your insurance. Not going to happen. Good luck affording therapy with a PhD from a good research university. First of all, I don't think most PhDs from research universities, PhDs in psychology, actually go into therapy at all. Yeah, and exactly like Mark says, good people are in any field are rare. Some fields are very hard, so we just shouldn't expect to have much of that. So this is part of what I'm thinking about in terms of the fountain of comfort model of care, right? So we have to start seeing psychological interventions in a similar way as we look at aren't research and clinical practice two different tracks? Yes, they are, Don. They very much are. Yes. And yes, I so it was like I mean he was so most psychotherapists I believe there are more clinical social workers clinical social workers who are providing therapy than all psychologists, LPCCs, and well, funny enough, so the APA has MFTs and LPCCs calling them psychologists. Yeah, in California, LPCCs and MFTs are not allowed to call themselves psychologists, but there are definitely a lot more LCSWs, licensed clinical social workers, I believe, that then there are other forms, right? And good luck finding a psychiatrist who does therapy. Very, very small numbers, right? And if we're, but the thing is that the thing is that just as we have nurses, right? And you shouldn't have to go to a surgeon to get a blood draw, right? You shouldn't need a doctorate level mental health practitioner necessarily to do most of what would be called healthy psychological intervention, including and especially what ends up becoming rent-a-friend type therapy, which the vast majority of counselors who aren't doctor level, really what they are practicing is kind of like rent-a-friend therapy. Especially, I mean, if you're going to someone who's just getting, being covered by your insurance, and it's useful. It's not that it's not. So Yosef says Lacan is definitely a real postmodernist. Yeah, from everything I've seen, Lacan actually has a what's the name of that guy who supposedly had therapy down to 10 minutes? He wanted the therapy, mental health therapy, 10 minutes. Who was it? There was some guy, and frankly, I think it was the fact that he was just lazy. Like 10-minute sessions. Ugh. I suppose in certain ways it's possible, right? And again, I mean, this is part of the situation is we have a psychotherapeutic industry that's just very broken. So one of the things that I think is necessary is, instead of people picking individual therapists, which is what the vast majority of people end up doing, right? They figure that they need that they have something, oftentimes don't know what, but they're depressed or anxious, there's something wrong in their lives, and somebody tells them you need therapy, and they go get therapy. First of all, there is a real distinction made between what's called behavioral problems, such as substance abuse, and and mental health diagnosis, which is another thing. Um, and I'm not sure that's that's so real, but it exists. Um, but the question becomes, okay, let's say, yeah, you're definitely depressed, right? What do you do? You maybe you do call a suicide hotline. Guess what? The good suicide hotlines are supervised by um, by clinicians at best. Many of them are not even supervised by clinicians at all, which is shocking, right? I certainly assumed that there would be um, there would be at least supervision. And there are places that they have suicide hotlines which do have clinical supervision. I can tell you the clinical supervision generally isn't like top rate. It's not like the best psychotherapists end up becoming supervisors. Um, in fact, it from everything I've seen, the supervisors tend to be the people who are the worst at themselves at being therapists. They may have a lot good interpersonal skills, which makes them good at managing people. But yeah, I mean, the fact is, the people who are actually good at psychotherapy end up charging much more than insurance is willing to pay, more than generally anybody who is paying a salary is willing to pay. And they become independent. And if you can afford 150 to 250 to $500 an hour, yeah, they'll, those people, once they've established themselves as being capable, yeah, they get paid really well. Part of what has made, I believe, the mental health um, the mental health industry become so postmodern is, look, if you're just sitting there with someone who is just listening to you talk and fails to do really a good job of staying awake at all and just like listens to you, that has a clinically significant effect. It does. And I mean, Jordan Peterson has also said this many, many times. But when somebody is actually paying attention to you and they're incisive and they know enough about human behavior and they've actually studied the DSM and they have some ability to see what is problematic in your life and the methodology that is useful to you, that's great. Somebody who can actually diagnose correctly a mental health issue, really, really important. But that person isn't necessarily needed to provide the therapy. And this is part of why I think the fountain of comfort model, we need to have things like nurses, and there are such things as psychiatric nurses. That's not what I mean. I mean that when you talk about medical intervention, a nurse has a capacity to do certain things, right? Take certain measurements, etc. But the nurse isn't going to diagnose you and isn't going to prescribe medications and isn't going to, prescribe what interventions, etc. But they can administer them, right? Um, and there certainly isn't the type of coordination and handoff that there needs to be. I really believe. So one of my cousins is a psychiatrist, and part of his practice is they have nutritionists, right? I think that's genius. Having a nutritionist in your psychiatry practice, absolute genius, absolutely necessary. Because guess what? We talk a lot about biopsychosocial, but it's not just biopsychosocial, it's biopsychosocial spiritual, right? And if somebody has an emotional problem, it may be very much related to their physical problem. If somebody has a constant backache, are you really going to be surprised if they're depressed or anxious, etc.? Right? And so, I mean, Dr. Gary, of blessed memory, used to say, I mean, he was a psychiatrist for a good 50 years. And he used to say, people would come to him as a psychiatrist, and first thing he had to do was recognize if there's a physical ailment there, and that has to be the first line of when somebody is identified. And the question becomes, when does somebody become identified as somebody who needs psychiatric intervention, right? So with physical ailments, we expect people to feel the pain, go to a doctor. And sometimes their general practitioner will say, okay, this is something that's emotional, psychological, you need psychosomatic, you need to go to a psychiatrist, which a lot of people are very reticent to. The whole way, and I've been sitting here talking to myself mostly for the last half an hour. Peterson said he couldn't understand Lacan, so that tracks. Interesting. I don't remember that. I would be interested in knowing what the thing of that was. In fact, I never met anyone who claims to understand Lacan. Very telling indeed. I know Zizek quotes him, like references him a lot. And Zizek, despite any disagreements I may have with him, and frankly, I haven't found that many things. Like when I listen to him, it's not like I disagree with Zizek very much. He calls himself a Marxist, but when he explains his Marxism, it doesn't sound very Marxist to me. Yeah, I've never listened to Zizek and found something that I found he was saying was stupid, which was the interesting part about how he would bring up Lacan, and which made me think, Lacan, hey Lynn, glad you're here. Press like and subscribe, people. People project into postmoderns and assume they are smart, but I've never heard them say anything smart or non-obvious. You mean the postmoderns? Well, I mean, Foucault had a lot of good arguments. He was, um, yeah. Colonimus says his spitting is off putting. It is. Zizek is an academic troll. Is he? He's upset that he was right but ignored, as so many of the academics that troll. Fair enough. Also evil. Arguments about what? I mean, Foucault was very influential in his critique um, of psychology. He was very influential in his being a proponent for Islamism in Iran. I don't think it's Coke, Lynn, but I'm pretty sure it's not Coke. There are plenty of people who do Coke. I don't think they're constantly playing with their nose like he is. No, I mean, Foucault was very, very influential. Zizek is clearly not a communist. That came out clearly in the debate with Peterson, and Peterson pointed it out. Therefore, that was a troll. Really? You think it's Coke? I don't know enough about Coke, but I have no idea who these people are that you're mentioning, Kirk. I don't know, man. Everything about Foucault seems to be him just trying to justify diddling kids. Yes, that definitely is the case. So this is one of the things about people with high IQ and low wisdom. They will rationalize whatever they want, and that is precisely, and Mark confirms it. They will rationalize. I mean, that's the thing with Foucault. He was good at making arguments. I don't think you can deny that. He made effective arguments, although, I mean, mostly I think it was in French. But yeah, he was a horrible human being. He was an absolutely horrible human being. I mean, I guess you would say the same thing about Rousseau, right? And I've heard people complaining about Kant. I don't remember the actual life of Kant. Nietzsche was very smart and incisive, but he wasn't wise in any sense of the word. Absurdism is easy to do with logic, reason, and rationality. Absurdism? I'm not sure what you mean. Chad Hobbs, very funny. Something funny going on with French philosophers. Yeah, French philosophy, from everything I've seen, is tends to be incredibly bad. I'm starting to feel better about not having read any of these people. So this is part of the thing. It's like, I'm not sure any of these people are worthy. Like, if we're actually treating mental health as we should, as an empirical thing, you can talk about the various people who innovated various theories. That's good and well. The same way as in a chemistry class, you might talk about I don't know, Bohr's model, or in but the problem with psychology is there's so little empiricism. There's so little empiricism, and that's partially my thing with affirmations and why I started this. affirmations, just like any diet, can be good for certain people. Um, you can't generalize that, and people do, which is yeah. A Mark being Mark. There are no French philosophers, just reprehensible French intellectuals. See, I have enough disdain for philosophers that I don't call. I think calling someone a philosopher puts them on a lower level than intellectual, because I think you have to have wisdom to be an actual intellectual. Would I call Foucault an intellectual or a philosopher? He was a degenerate who was good at arguing. What do you call that? He was highly intelligent. I think the worst that I know of personal life wise are Foucault and Schopenhauer. I don't know much about Schopenhauer's life. But yeah, Foucault was a horrible excuse for a human being. Yosef says there are some pretty big differences among them. Lacan isn't great, but I don't think he is evil in the way Foucault is. Okay. Heidegger is probably worse than those, Cal. I don't know if I count Heidegger as worse than Foucault. Heidegger was a Nazi, but like, is being a Nazi worse than being a proponent of Islamism because you want to diddle little kids? I mean, come on. Mark says all philosophy past Plato and Aristotle are just sterling. Wow, it's been forever.
How you doing, man?
Good. Are you still in? You were in Costa Rica?
Well, right now I'm in Colombia, but yeah, I've been traveling a lot. Before this, I was in Europe. Yeah,
Oh,
Am-
wow.
yeah, Amsterdam, Sweden, Spain.
Sounds
Uh,
like fun.
yeah, it's great. What about you? Yeah, it's been
I-
a long time.
I've just been same old, same old. Trying to finally finish my master's of social work. Yeah, but
Okay,
yeah.
because I saw it said counseling student.
I like it. I like it, Sterling. I like
Well,
it.
no, I was listening because I was learning a lot. There's a lot of different types of counselors, and distinguishing that between a psychologist
Hmm. Yeah.
potentially. So, but yeah, you're going to be a counselor, is that right?
Yeah, so I am doing two programs simultaneously. Don't ask me why. Um, so I'm getting my master's of social work, which when that's done, I'll be a clinical social worker,
Uh,
and they do counseling. I'm also doing a program for addiction counseling, and addiction counselors um, can only counsel people regarding their addictions, and so it's a more limited thing than a clinical social worker who can basically do anything. A psychologist, a marital and family therapist, a licensed professional clinical counselor, um, and a psychologist all can basically do the same thing in terms of providing therapy. Psychiatrists and physician assistants and psychiatric nurse practitioners can provide counseling, and they can prescribe medicine, the other ones can't. Um, and yeah, so that's all the various types of counselors.
Okay. So, like in the course of this,
Hmm.
have you learned things psychologically about yourself that you?
Somewhat. I mean, I, like many people, if not most people who go into counseling, do so after many years of therapy. So I've told this story many times before, but about 15 years ago, I had severe agoraphobia. And I've had post traumatic stress disorder ever since I was a child. I was a child in the Iran-Iraq War. I spent about 6 months in a bomb shelter, sleeping in a bomb shelter during the war. So, like, you know, I've I've had a lot of therapy, but about 15 years ago, my agoraphobia was bad enough that um, there were days I couldn't leave. Like, I had difficulty leaving my bedroom to go to my own bathroom. Um, I I almost didn't leave the house, like, for a whole year without having panic attacks. Um, and so I had a lot of therapy, which helped a lot. um, and uh, so unfortunately, so the reason why I'm doing the two programs is when I started the substance abuse counseling stuff, I was learning stuff, but my professors told me that you have to get your master's degree to get a license. And that's what I wanted to do. So I actually stopped the substance abuse program to do the master's degree. Um, but one of the reasons I stopped, I, I went back to do the substance abuse stuff was I have found my master's degree not to be very educational.
Hmm.
The substance abuse courses were far, far more educational. I mean, there are some things that I have learned from my master's degree, but, like, considering how many more classes and how much more money I spent on it, uh, it yeah, not I'm not very happy with the way the entire mental health profession functions, and the education is pretty bad. Yeah.
Including the one you got.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I really lucked out with the substance abuse program, because the substance abuse program is really excellent in
Mm.
ways that it doesn't necessarily need to be. And I didn't realize that. That's the main reason I decided to go back and continue it. And some of the teachers are really, really good. Now, do I think that everybody who graduates from the program learns to do the things that the teachers teach? No, not really. Like, I had this one professor for two classes who taught me so much. I love this man so much. But but he's one of like he's 85 years old, first of all. Second, he's one of those guys. Have you ever, like, met a mechanic that he just knows how to fix your car, and he doesn't know how he knows how to fix your car? You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
So this professor was very much like that. Like, in class, he would actually analyze me and fellow students in class. And he was absolutely master. Like, he cut through people like a razor blade, right? Um and then people would ask him, like, why did you do X, Y, and Z? And he would give an answer. And about 30% of the time I would be like, nah, that's not why. You know? but he really knew his stuff. And watching him work, I learned a lot. And frankly, when he went in on me, like it was like, oh my God, like how did he know? You know? Um so but yeah, the substance abuse course that I'm taking, like it was set up several years ago, and the person who set it up at Pierce College, which is where it's at, and it's great. And frankly, for even if you don't have a substance abuse problem, like if you can take these classes, and some of them are online, like that professor I'm talking about, his classes are online. Go ahead and take the class. It's some of the best money you will ever spend, right? Just getting the therapy from him, right? But like it was set up by somebody who really cared, and apparently he's gone now. And the teachers, like as the older teachers are going away, like I'm not sure the new teachers are going to be anywhere as good as the old teachers. You know what I mean? So yeah, like when this 85-year-old professor stops teaching, I have zero clue how, because like it's not like he was teaching from a textbook. He wasn't. And it's not like the textbook, like the first class had a textbook. The text had nothing to do with what he actually taught me. And the second class didn't even have a textbook. It was just him, right? And that's where most therapists actually learn what they learn. Like with my master's degree, I, I've learned like having the practicum, having the part where I actually had to work somewhere, like that was by far the most educational. And once you finish your master's degree, you have to do 3,000 clinical hours. And basically everybody says, yeah, nobody cares about the actual degree. It's once you start working, that's when you're going to learn stuff.
Yeah, you need the degree to get your foot in the door. Almost.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem with the degree is it doesn't the degree doesn't get your foot in the door, because like it's not in any way gatekeeping. Like you have to work really hard to fail the classes that I'm taking. Like you have to work really hard to fail the
Wow.
classes that I'm taking.
Wow.
You know? And so people know that. And so just the fact that you have a master's in psychology or social work,
Uh,
right? It doesn't tell anyone that you're at all competent.
not the way you're describing it. No.
Yeah, what it tells them is, hey, you took all these classes and you like did the work, so there's some level of, frankly, half of it is just like the maturity, because oh well, you're not a 25-year, by the time you get a master's degree you're at least 24, 25, right? And honestly, it seems to me that not a small part of the degree process is just, oh, it has to be long enough so that you're not a teenager. Which is like insane.
Gotcha.
But like, would you go to a teenager for psychotherapy? Like, what? How can a teenager even have the, like, they don't even have the personal insight about emotions and stuff. So like, you want to go to somebody who's like a wise old soul, which is why pastoral care is a thing, right? Like people go to their pastors, and their pastors oftentimes are providing as much, if not better, therapy than any of their psychologists. It's just, well, we can't have that anymore because we live in a secular society, right? And it's like, there. Look, a good pastor, a wise person who spent their entire life like learning about wisdom and stuff like that, that person is going to do you a lot better than most psychotherapists.
And I wonder, like you were talking earlier about psychologists, and then people will be reluctant to go to a psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
And would it made me wonder, would a person be justified, you know, trying to change everything they could working with a psychologist before they go to the psychiatrist? And I guess it depends on the level of the condition at hand. I don't know,
Okay.
or
Yeah.
is it best to try to combine all the different types of therapy? But then again, not everyone has access to that.
So you're bringing up something really important and good, right? So psychoactive medications, um, unfortunately, most psychoactive medications are being prescribed by general practitioners. Okay. So that means that it's a person um, who's not actually trained to in psychology really at all is prescribing most of the psychoactive medication, like people on antidepressants and stuff, which is a horrible, horrible idea. Okay. Because if you take antidepressants and you don't deal with the problem, you're just gonna end up spiraling more and more. And so like just taking psychoactive medications without therapy, I think, is probably one of the worst ideas you could possibly have. Another bad idea people have is going to a psychiatrist, getting some sort of diagnosis, and then going on medication and staying on the medication for the rest of their lives. So this is one of the things my cousin, who's the psychiatrist, is really working on. Is no, like there are some number of people who have a chemical imbalance that okay, given that chemical imbalance, maybe that individual person needs to be on particular psychoactive medication, right? That's not the vast majority of people. The vast majority of people, if they're having psychological problems, it's it has to do with what's going on in their lives. In a similar way as, okay, there's type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. Um, and so, if I'm not getting it wrong, type 1 is their body just doesn't make insulin. And like, even as a child, uh, even as a child, like they need insulin because their body doesn't make insulin, right? And that's some people. And then there's adult onset diabetes, right? Person doesn't exercise. The person doesn't uh,
Diet.
diet. The person like is eating a lot of junk food, whatever. They're overweight, right? They're gonna get diabetes, right? Well, that's a problem, right? Like you don't treat those two things in the same way, except you sometimes do, right? Because okay, what exactly is going on here, right? What exactly is like, can I get this person to exercise and diet? Maybe a shot of Ozempic is really going to help them a lot, because this person's never going to diet and exercise, right? Or insulin, right? Like, you're not just going to cut off the person's leg because they're never going to diet and exercise. You give them insulin so you don't end up cutting off their legs. And really, the practice of medicine is very much harm reduction, right? You have to meet people where they are. If somebody's really stupid and going rock climbing and breaking their legs and arms every single week, right? You don't say, no, I'm not gonna set your arm, you unless you stop going rock climbing, and then you set their arm and then they go rock climbing again. What are you gonna do? Right? Not set their arm? And people don't realize that there really is an equivalence there between mental health and physical health in similar ways. So you can have a imbalance in the serotonin levels because there's something like really physically wrong with you, right? I know people like that. Like, for a good 20 years had signs of depression, went on antidepressants, now is a functional human being in ways that they weren't before. And it really was physical. This person was 20 years, and it's hereditary, right? Their mom and grandma and whatever, right? So that happens. Just like there are people who with type 1 diabetes. And then it happens that there are people who've gone through like some serious shit, right? And that person like needs therapy and needs help and they may be living in a terrible living situation, right? Which may include their physical health, right? If somebody's actually in physical pain, right? Well, of course they're going to be depressed. If someone is in constant pain, which certain conditions, people are in constant pain, right? Like, do you not expect that person to be depressed, right? So it's very complex. And is it a good idea to go to a mental health therapist who doesn't prescribe things and wait until they tell you, hey, you need to ask your psychiatrist, you need to go to a psychiatrist and get a prescription? I think that's generally a very good idea. But that's generally a very good idea because most psychiatrists and a lot of doctors who aren't like, they're just general practitioners, will write you a script, hand it to you, and you'll never see them again. Right? And they're not actually fixing what might actually be the situation. My ideal way of doing it, I think everybody needs a support group. Everybody needs a support group. And it's really hard, if not impossible, to find good support groups. And when you have a good support group, like, it becomes really obvious somebody needs individual therapy. So I ran support grouts at a outpatient clinic during my internship. And I would talk to the individual therapists of the people in the support group about the things that they may need. And sometimes I would talk to the person individually because like it was necessary, right? And so if you have a good support group, and it doesn't even have to be led by a professional, a mental health professional. Although, I mean, if you have a good mental health professional running it, great, right? And this really, for me, comes from the substance abuse things. Like, in substance abuse, everybody is in tons of groups. They make you go to tons of groups because group therapy, what a group therapist can like what one session of group therapy can do, 6 months with a great um, psychiatrist might not, psychologist doing individual therapy might not achieve that, because it's a very different dynamic. But certain things work better in groups, and certain things work better with individual counseling, and certain things sometimes you just need to give that person that prescription to just be able to get on with things, right? And a good professional treats the individual that they're talking to depending on that individual. Too many people have one size fits all answers. And I'm sure you've seen this with diets, right? People are like, oh, this diet, it'll fix everything in your life because it worked for them, right? And it's like, well, some diets work better for some people and worse for others. If somebody is like really thin, you don't necessarily tell them to go on the same diet as somebody who's really fat, right? It, like, you have to deal with the person and the problems that person has. And unfortunately, that's not what goes on. So to answer your question, generally, yeah, you're best off going to a somebody who doesn't prescribe medication. And if you need it, that person will say, hey, we should get you a prescription if they're good. They might not be good though. Right? And that's a huge part of the problem. As a consumer, how do you know who's good? Like, this is the problem I started with affirmations, right? You might go to a psychologist who makes you feel great every time, right? But you're back there every week for the rest of your life. And that's how some psychologists, really bad psychologists, make their money, right? They find somebody they make an individual connection with, right? They become basically their best friend. The really bad ones take advantage of them sexually, right? They certainly take advantage of them financially, right? And how do you know how to avoid a situation like that when you're the person who's getting therapy? And that was my whole thing with Fountain of Comfort, right? I think the worst person to choose your therapist is the person who needs therapy.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder. Okay, so would I be justified to try to work on my own issues as much as possible, fix my nutrition, fix my way of life, my lifestyle, my habits, try to sort all that out before I go seek help? And just the same way, like if I had diabetes, would I be justified in, exercising and trying to fix it on my own before seeking some sort of outside help that I can't even verify whether it's good or not?
Oh yeah. Especially if, like, okay, there are times you need to go to the emergency room,
I'm
right?
listening. I'm listening. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No problem. There are times you need to go to the emergency room, and you need to go to the emergency room. And, like, yeah, but now add in the social contagion layer. Yeah, that's huge too. Um one part of the problem with self-help, which for the people who can do it, it's great, right? But part of the problem with self-help is if a person really has a bad so I keep on going back to the anorexia example. So you have somebody who's anorexic, right? And they believe that the best thing for them is to lose weight. It's like, no, like, no, right? And for them, self-care becomes losing weight, right? Even though they're not whatchamacallit. And
Obese.
yeah, they're even underweight, right? Like
Okay.
you get somebody who's underweight who thinks they need to lose weight. Well, that happens psychologically too, right? There are people who have psychological like compulsions or whatever. And so especially people with personality disorders, like a person with a personality disorder, one of my professors said, you don't even tell someone with most personality disorders, you don't even tell them what their diagnosis is, because all they will do is get mad at you, because they're not going to believe, A, they're not going to believe you, and B, they're going to get really, really mad at you and probably stop coming along at all. Right? So somebody with borderline or narcissistic personality disorder, there's some disagreement about what exactly it is, but like borderline personality disorder, a borderline personality, like you can't tell them they're borderline. Like a borderline personality, somebody who has borderline personality disorder will never wonder if they have it, or say that, oh, I have borderline personality disorder. Like that just doesn't happen. Like so it really depends on the individual, but definitely I highly recommend reading self-help books like Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. Like for most intelligent people, that's going to do you a lot more good than a bad therapist will. And a bad therapist will fuck you over. Excuse my French. But you will definitely, like, a bad therapist will destroy you. And so, yeah, I mean, Jikian says, yeah, if anything, psychologists should teach people to be more mentally independent rather than making them dependent on their therapy. Yeah, they should, but do they? Is that in their financial interest? Not the way our system is set up, especially because the best therapists, you're not even going through insurance. So like you're paying weekly, right? A good therapist, easy, $150 a week, right? And that's for an hour. And yeah,
a bad therapist might cost you the same, or even more.
right, yeah, and that's why I really think that the system we have set up is really, really bad. And the one that people complain about the most is the one that I think actually functions the most. So the Kaiser system here in California, the mental health providers are and I have to say, my brother-in-law runs Kaiser, so I'm a tiny bit biased, but I don't say this just because he's my brother-in-law. But the way the Kaiser system is set up, right? The insurance company actually hires is the one that, so it's an HMO that also has to deal with your behavioral health. And I think they have the system set up the best way possible. They really do, in my opinion. And it's the one people complain about the most. Because what happens is when you go to Kaiser, you go to one person who um, who uh, figures out your diagnosis and assigns you to one of their therapists, right? So there's some level of matching what your diagnosis and what your personality, who you are, with the problem, right? That's not your own. Um, and but it's people complain about Kaiser the most, including the therapists, right? Um, so yeah.
I, I would, from what it sounds like, you're saying the therapists are handpicked by the insurance companies,
Mm-hmm.
which makes me a little bit nervous when the people whose profit, is determined by those employees. They might not be choosing the employees that are best for the the patient, and maybe better for their pocketbook.
Well, that's the thing. Better for their pocketbook, generally, the way an HMO is set up, right? So you're talking to an insurance agent. So the difference between an HMO and a PPO, right? So a PPO pays um, per service, right? A health maintenance organization, the way it works is capitation. Okay. And that's how Kaiser really works, is that they get a capitation. So you're buying the health insurance through Kaiser, right? And that's what they get paid mostly. I mean, there is a copay, but the copay isn't the big part of the expenditure, right? And so they have, with an HMO, they have a financial incentive in you being healthy. Whereas with a PPO, they have a financial incentive in you not being healthy. So as an insurance agent, when I would get um, a complaint, like one of these two complaints, I would be able to know, oh, this is the insurance you have, and we need to switch you to the other one. If when a person would come to me and they would say, I keep on trying to get a doctor's appointment, I can't get a doctor's appointment, right? I was like, okay, you must be on an HMO. Oh, yeah, they're on an HMO. Why? The doctor gets paid whether or not they go into the office, right? The person goes, so the doctor actually gets paid more, has an easier time if you're not going to the doctor at all, right? And for a bad doctor, that they're like, oh, well, I'll give you an appointment in 2 months, right? Hopefully won't have to deal with you. But if you end up in the hospital, the doctor has to pay for the hospital bill, right? That's how an HMO works. But if somebody says, yeah, my doctor like is always ordering these tests and he keeps on saying, you have to come in next week and next week and next week, and I like is constantly making me come in, then I know it's a PPO, right? Because the doctor gets paid every time you come in, right? But a good doctor, like people who are actually seriously good at their job, they may be influenced by their finances a bit, but most doctors aren't thinking, hey, let me get the most money out of this person. Some are. There's definitely that. But most of them are just trying to do a good job, and the system they're in incentivizes them in different ways, which they fall into. In any case, like, yeah, it's very difficult to know which way and how to really balance this. Um, yeah. Tell me if I'm wrong. Pick and choose. But it seems to me that a large chunk of the people who became therapists are probably not the kind of people who should be guiding other people through their psychological health journey. 100% correct. There was some effort at times to require therapists to have had therapy or not to have a diagnosis. Believe it or not, in Los Angeles, there was a consent decree because some of the therapists in child and family services complained that they were being discriminated against because of their mental health situation. And they because of their mental health situation, and the court said that you can no longer discriminate against people who have mental health problems in being therapists, which is like, oh my God, right? But I would say a majority of the people who go into psychology go into it because of their own personal interest in psychology. And frankly, even if you are, and this is part of what I'm trying to build into the Fountain of Comfort model with lots of people, is the emotional strain. Like, it's not like a normal doctor. When you're actually like dealing with someone and showing empathy and interest, and they're telling you about like really bad shit in their lives, right? You can get PTSD from that. And that's why a lot of people end up leaving the profession, right? So it's not an easy thing to solve, that the people who tend to go into psychology go into it because they've had their own it's funny, somebody made a hit reel on me, which I was flattered, but they were talking about like they took clips from me saying like, yeah, I've had psychological problems myself. I'm still on going to therapy and have take psychoactive medications. So like, yeah, like I'm not saying I'm like Mr. Perfect in any shape, right? But part of that, I think, is switching away from the individual model. Like, the individual therapist with the individual client, I think, individual patient, I think is a bad model. I really think we have to move more into a clinical, like, okay, this is a group of mental health professionals who work together, and people like from a community, because this is another problem we haven't talked about yet. So in substance abuse problems, we talk about the identified patient. And part of the problem is there's no such thing as an individual human being, right? There is no such thing as an individual human being. And John Vervaeke really talks about like distributed cognition and how parts of our thinking is in other people. That's why if you like a person in solitary confinement will lose their mind. They will lose their mind. A human being cannot live by themselves, emotionally, mentally, physically. Like it's just not a thing, right? So when and the word codependent, most people misunderstand it because they think they understand the words because they split co and dependent off. So the word codependency actually comes from Alcoholics Anonymous. And what they found out was that you have the identified alcoholic, right? That's the dependent, right? They're dependent on alcohol, right? And then there are people who enable the alcoholic. their family members, their friends, you know, and those people are codependents on that dependency on alcohol. And what they found out was, like, let's say somebody has an alcoholic kid, right? You can give therapy to the mom and dad without the alcoholic being involved at all. And the alcoholic is more likely to recover because you gave therapy to the codependent, right? So having a support group, having friends who are psychologically healthy and supportive is like a really, and family, friends and family, if you have family, right? uh, so that's, it's a problem, right? But like, you can't be sane by yourself. You can only be sane in community with other human beings, right? So yeah, it's so
My family's batshit, so I'm
that
screwed.
happens. Well, that happens to a lot of people, and that's one of the reasons why, you know, like, you can make friends with people who will, and you can join a community of, I know you're not religious, but like a religious community, or even not a religious community, like join the Universalists, or join the whatchamacallit, um join, uh, here in Los Angeles, we have atheist Sunday assembly, right? But picking people who you can, in community with them, be sane together, that's really, really important. Having people in your life, right? A spouse, a best friend, like, and this is one of the things, like, my pets, like, it's no whatchamacallit, it's no substitute for actual people, but they will help you stay sane in ways, like, if you're all by yourself, because you have to understand, okay, so this is Ian McGilchrist, John Vervaeke stuff, right? So you have the two hemispheres of your brain, right? Ian McGilchrist explains, right? So the right side of your brain is the part that's tasked with monitoring everything, like, oh, is there somebody behind me? Is there somebody behind me? Is there somebody behind me? And the Mark says, no, Jacob, cats make everyone worse, dude. Everyone knows this. Um, so there, like, your right brain is is constantly trying to be aware of what's around you, right? And your left brain is what's paying attention. So the way he explains it is, imagine an animal in the forest trying to eat, right? So it's doing two things. One is actually eating, right? So it's grasping, it's moving, right? It's paying attention to whatever it's eating. And at the same time, it has to not get eaten, right? And that's what the right brain does. It's paying attention to everything else that you're not paying attention to while you're eating, right? Well, if you're by yourself, your brain has to do all of that constantly, all by itself, right? Have you guys seen the picture of the ducks sleeping in a row? Um, Here,
No,
let me. This is one of my favorite things with. Where's the duck picture? Um, is there a picture here? Where's the picture? I'm not finding a good picture of it, but there are definitely a lot of articles. So what happens is ducks will sleep in a row, right? And the duck all the way on the left is keeps one eye open, and the duck all the way on the right keeps one eye open, and the ducks in the middle get more sleep than the ducks on either side. Here's a scientific from science.org. Um, Here is the link. Here, let me pull it up and read it.
You might be able to
Yeah,
achieve the same level of comfort with like a home security system.
maybe. Yeah. The question is whether so this is the article, which yeah, so like ducks, yeah, and but if you don't like yeah, if you don't have that comfort, and that's one of the things, like why getting a dog, I didn't realize this, like my therapist, one of the worst therapists ever, she was abusive, but she told me to get a dog, so there you go. um like I got a dog and I became a lot less anxious, and I didn't know why. But now that I better understand the physiology and what Vervaeke and McGilchrist explain, like it makes a lot of sense why just I was living all by myself and I was anxious. And then I got a dog, a little bit less anxiety, right? And like we don't necessarily know why things work that way, but when you're talking to another person, you will notice like you, you stop you stop paying as much attention to what's around you. You really focus when you're in a room with someone, talking to them face to face. There's a level of like bonding that happens. And part of that is I can see your eyes, you can see my eyes. So my brain knows that your eyes are looking behind my head, and your brain knows that my eyes are looking behind your head. And both of us stop monitoring our surroundings as much as we did before. Right? So, yeah, I mean, distributed cognition, John Vervaeke talks about this. It's really really good, and it's really important. You're you outsource parts of your brain and your thinking to the people you talk to. That's why you need to talk to other people.
I think there's it can be draining. There can be some fatigue, some energy cost that comes with that. Reading other people, and uh, when one person starts running in a crowd, other people start running. When
Mhm.
one person jumps like something fell from the sky, you might have that same reaction, and it comes with a cost to a degree. I feel like, and I feel like you could achieve the same thing without people, like you said, a dog, or like in nature, like people like who live out in the wilderness will take their cues from like the sounds of the birds or the lack of a sound of the birds. So yeah, and I feel like to a degree, some people will get fed up with that, with being too socialized, with being in the rat race, with being in a highly urbanized environment, and because it comes with an energy cost, they might feel more comfortable out in the wilderness without those people. And I feel like you can still get those cues from other places. But
That's definitely, I mean, yes, you can get at least some of that. Yes. And you are absolutely correct. Too many people can be really stressful. And Some people can be like, if somebody else, one of the things my professor said was, how do you know if somebody's crazy? They drive you crazy when you talk to them, right? They're and they're like, especially if if the other person, but if you develop a good bond with someone, that, like, it shouldn't be draining, especially like that's what happens when people bond to a spouse, right? And they have a good bond with each other, especially when they have a sexual bond, right, where they're physically comfortable with each other. And I'm sure you've seen this, like two people who are actually very comfortable with each other, they will like they they really complete each other. And so yeah, if you can get that, it's great.
And, and when I say draining, when you're so invested in that other person and what's going on with them and what's causing them pain, and you're listening and you're thinking about that and you're working to better them, then that does come at a cost. Although it might not be draining, one might see the benefits of saying, "Hey, look, I'm going to the wilderness where all I have to worry about is myself, and I can focus all that energy on myself instead of, yeah." But I guess it's just up to the person whether you value that sort of relationship or not.
I would say, and so when I was doing the domestic violence support groups, one of the big questions people would ask is, what, like, how do I know if this is a good relationship or it's a bad relationship? And the number one way you can tell a good relationship from a bad relationship is whether the two of you are more competent together than you are apart. Is the sum of the two of you, like, are you operating independently, which unfortunately a lot of people do, and that's really what Mark talks about with the intimacy crisis. Is sometimes you have people who are married and really they're just two independent people, right? And honestly, if they're completely two independent people, they are making life a little bit more complicated and difficult for each other. When you have an actual bond, when you have a real bond, right? With that real bond, that person, actually, the two of you function as what we call in psychology a dyad. And you can even have a triad. But a dyad functions, so classical dyad is a mother and a toddler, right? So the mother and the toddler, well, to some extent, you might say like the mother would be more functional without the toddler. That's not necessarily true. Um, but certainly for the toddler, like, everything's about that mother, right? But when you have a dyad, which is working well together, intellectually bonded people, then they they help each other keep. So this is one of the things we learned from cognitive science. So you'll notice, like, the LLMs, the AI takes tons of computing power and processing, right? And tons of energy. And one of the things that cognitive scientists, so cognitive science, really cognitive psychology started when they were trying to figure out if I they were trying to figure out if I want to make a computer do what a human being does, like, how do I model human thinking through a computer? And one of the first things they discovered is that there doesn't appear to be enough computing power in the human brain to actually run a human being. In fact, what they found out, which is a little bit even more surprising, is that there isn't even enough computing power within your skin to run a human being. We outsource, and this is what John Vervaeke calls distributed cognition. And I mean, the psychology department at University of Toronto, where Jordan Peterson was and John Vervaeke was, they came up with the field of cognitive psychology. Like that, they came up with that term in that thing, or in that psychology department. And so one of the things that he talks about a lot is distributed cognition. When you have two bonded people, the two of them actually, like, part of their personality really resides in the other person. And the two of them are far more functional than they would be split apart. But that's a good relationship. And not everybody has a good relationship, especially if you don't have a lot of trust and intimacy. And by intimacy, we don't just mean physical intimacy, although physical intimacy can be one of the ways in which you become bonded like that. And a good husband and wife or team, like the two of them, and I'm sure you've seen it. I've seen it. People see it all the time. Like with old couples, one of them dies, the other one dies not too long after that. Like they are really a bonded pair. And this isn't just among humans. This happens in lots of mammals and birds. And you could even talk about like hives and stuff. Like there is collective consciousness, which is something that is emergent. It's bigger than the sum of the individual parts, which happens in collective. And this may in fact be the reason why we have identity. Like octopi don't have, they're incredibly intelligent. They don't have a sense of identity. They because they're solitary creatures. But we're not solitary creatures. We have a functioning capacity to bind to other people and operate at a higher level when there's two of us bonded in a dyad or three in a triad. But certainly, I mean, especially once you get into large numbers, especially if you go past the Dunbar number, whatever that is, you arguments, like I think most people put Dunbar around 200. I think it's not crazy to say it may be even up to 2,000 or 3,000, because human beings have names and stuff and we can track it. But certainly once you get above 3,000, yeah, like not a possibility. Andrew has a headache.
Well, and yeah, does that justify divorce or splitting up if you're no longer, as a couple, like, you know, like you said, are being more productive than if you were apart?
So what I would tell people is if the two of you are worse together than you are apart, it might be best. I mean, different cultures have different cultural expectations for marriage. But certainly if the two of you like incapacitate each other, I would say generally it really depends. Like, is it look, is the problem that you as an individual are not able to work well and function with others? Well, maybe the fix is to make you, to help you be more capable of functioning with someone else. But sometimes, and this is part of the problem with modern psychology, like generally, one of the things we say, and it's perfectly true, is you can change yourself, you can change your reaction to other people. You can't change other people, right? So I I can change how I react to somebody else. I can't change how that person reacts to me, right? Um and so especially in individual therapy, like, and this is the thing with marriage and family therapy, like the hope is that both, or however many people are involved, all of them want to work on themselves and make things work better. um, but if if the problem is you, right, and you, like, leaving this person isn't gonna help you, um you actually need, you have problems you need to work through. Having someone else in your life, especially if it's somebody who's healthy and who you can trust, can really help you. And yeah, like, it's not good for man to be alone. This is one of the first things it says in the Bible, and it's ancient wisdom. It really is. Human beings don't function well alone.
No, I'm not going to disagree with that. Um, which you can make the argument that that's why I should have as many girlfriends as I can attain.
Well, I mean, honestly, I don't like a human beings. People like the polyamory discussion is a discussion lots of people have. Um, from what I have seen, um, human beings actually are, in fact, built for monogamy. Um, certainly, certainly, human females, and like there are there are cultures that have practiced polygamy. The only cultures we know of that have successfully had polyandry is when brothers marry the same wife, and that's been in very limited cultures. But I mean, you were talking about like too many people, and it really, once you're talking about like more than two, three people, like you can't have that type of relationship with more than two or three people. I don't think that's possible at all. Um, I'm not going to say that it's scientifically proven that it's impossible, but when you look anthropologically, monogamous societies have always done so much better than polygamous societies. Polygamy has generally been in situations where mm, the men are dying in or being killed in war. Like, that's when most societies have done. Poly bad for kids, yeah, generally. Like, I haven't seen, there's definitely people on, especially on the internet, especially in the rationalist club, who are trying to make it, and transhumanist club. But honestly, yeah, I don't think that works very well. Cassandra says, I feel like a common breakup excuse is I was losing myself. Would that be different from bonding with someone? Look, if you're losing yourself, like, what do you exactly mean by that? Sometimes you are in an abusive relationship where the other person is controlling, consuming, like, and like debilitating. That's a problem. But if by losing yourself you mean I'm falling in love, I am becoming something different than I was, like, some people are just scared of intimacy and scared of love. Like, you lose yourself in the other person when you're in love, you fall in love, right? And um yeah, some people are just really scared of that.
And I feel like some, I'm not getting a doctorate in psychology or anything, but I feel like some people are afraid of not experiencing that love,
Right, being lonely, like, yeah, being
and
lonely, yeah.
and so they convince themselves that they need it and that they have something special because that's the full circle. That's what they believe that they needed, and so I mean, just as you could say like someone's afraid of the intimacy,
Hmm.
I feel like equally someone could be afraid of not having it, and so they rush into it as
Well,
opposed to.
yeah, definitely people will be afraid of not having it, yeah. And I mean, the question really does become, like, is that fear, right, of there, life is about trade-offs, right? Like, you're going to have trade-offs, and it's hard to know what the perfect optimal solution is. This is part of the thing that was a lot easier when the world was a lot smaller, right? Like, people lived in a small enough town that, like, you only had so many people, like, it was you and five women, and it was like, one of those five is going to be your wife, or you're going to be alone. But now we have lots of fish in the sea mentality, because it seems like we have infinite choices. And, like, you're traveling internationally, so you kind of do have infinite choices, right? And so we start wondering, like, am I losing something? Like, would I be better off with someone else, right? um but I mean, you don't want to end up alone. That's one of the things. So I'm an insurance broker, and a lot of the people um when I was doing more Medicare, I don't really do Medicare anymore. When I was doing more Medicare, I would get these people in Los Angeles who had turned 65. They may have been married, but they they're divorced or whatever, right? They have no kids. They have friends, but, like, now they're 65 years old and they're making plans for how they're going to live the rest of their lives. And especially especially for the women, and some of them have a lot of money, but, like, you have to think about your entire life. And yeah, being alone is a real fear to have, and allowing that fear to cause you, like, if you turn any single fear into, like, look, not having enough to eat, that's a real fear, right? But is it a relevant fear to me? Not really. I mean, in the United States, that's not something I have to worry about, right? So if I am squirreling away food, um, if I'm constantly worried about that. That may be an overemphasis, which is a problem. Or if I'm not bothering enough with it, that can be an underemphasis. That's a problem. But like, I need food, and human beings need other human beings.
Depending on what you want to get out of it. I mean, depending on what you want to get out of it. I mean, we're certainly a social species. I'm not debating that.
Yeah. 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 I mean, my great grandfather, Jacob, who I'm named after, so he had four wives in total. His first wife apparently died in a flood with his first kid. I heard that his second wife, he got a divorce or something. I don't know exactly what happened with her. His third wife was my great grandmother, and she had a bunch of kids with him and decided she basically wanted nothing to do with him but didn't want a divorce. And back then, like, people didn't really get divorces as much, although apparently his second wife did. And so she
Yeah,
was
but
still
we don't speak of her. The second wife.
yeah. And so his and she was still living in the house with him, and he took his fourth wife because this was Iran, and in Iran, you could have multiple wives. So I actually met the fourth wife. We called her Grandma Miriam, um, and she was much younger than my great grandmother, who was the third wife. And apparently, what happened was when my great grandmother died, um, Grandma Miriam left and left the country and moved to Chicago. So when I met her in Los Angeles when she came and visited. Uh, and because like she had become better friends with her sister wife, my great grandmother, than she was with my great grandfather. And my great grandfather, fourth wife, still and lots of kids and grandkids and great grandkids. I'm not the only Jacob Federecci, and we're all named after him. Um, and like he still ended up living alone at the end of his life. I mean, his kids and grandkids took care of him, but yeah, he towards the end of his life, he had a wife who was living in Chicago.
Not necessarily the worst thing.
No, but it's funny. It's kind of funny to me that like she was a second wife, and after my great grandmother died, she decided to leave. Yeah, she was pretty old when I met her. This was in the late '80s. Yeah, I think I only met her that once.
Yeah, I feel like if you weren't married and you didn't have kids, for example, then
Mhm.
you might have, like you said, a lot of money to bring into retirement. So it's a trade off, as opposed to like if you had a bunch of kids, you might be broke, but you got people to take care of you.
Yeah, the problem is like and that was this was the problem that I would have with my clients is um how do you trust someone who is only doing it for the money to actually take care of you with your money as you get older and become less and less capable. And yeah, I mean, no one cares about money in retirement. Just go to a retirement home, you'll find out real quick. What you will find out is that there are some very expensive retirement homes, old age homes, and people end up living there for until they end up not being able to live there anymore. and then they like you have to have a lot of money to stay in one of those old age homes for very long, especially the good ones. And then you end up moving from place to place to, and yeah, things get things get can get pretty weird if you don't have somebody to take care of you. And that's, yeah.
Yeah,
Got to retire on a cruise ship. There you go.
I would just rather pay a professional to do it than burden my friends and family.
I understand, especially, hey, if you've got the money, that's great. It can get really really expensive though, and you have to be able to find. I know there are law firms. So I used to work with some law firms so they would they would bring their clients Medicare to me to take care of. So there were some law firms that like that was their thing. It's just well, so here in Los Angeles, uh at least some of them, the ones that I would end up dealing with would be some of the poorer ones who like had been working with more wealthy people, right? And so the lawyer would kind of be working with people who couldn't necessarily afford as much as like the very wealthy person, and but for as a favor we're taking care of their um friends or whatever. So yeah, it was an interesting situation. um yeah, the only thing is you also hear nightmares about people stealing people's money and stuff like that. But I've seen that happen with family as well. I've seen family really abusing their elders too. That happens too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would just hope that I'm in a place where it's all on video, as as opposed to at my son's house, in his basement.
Depends how you raised your son, I have to say. Um, but what you call it? Stephen Hawkins, like he was being abused. Like you remember that story?
I don't believe I do.
Yeah, like they caught Stephen Hawking, sorry. Um,
I thought he was doing the abusing.
no, 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 no. So here, this is from what you call it? This is from Yahoo. Uh, a former nurse for Hawking has been barred for misconduct. A former nurse of the late physicist Stephen Hawking was barred from practicing Tuesday after an independent panel determined she abused her position as a care provider. The Nursing and Midwifery Council struck Patricia Dowdy from its registry, citing multiple misconduct charges, including financial misconduct, dishonesty, not providing appropriate care, and not having the correct qualifications. The panel has found Mrs. Dowdy failed to provide the standards of good professional care that we expect and Professor Hawking deserved. As a
Yeah,
result, yeah.
she wasn't physically abusive.
Um, I had I had heard that there was, but I that's not what this um or maybe it was I don't know. I don't want to accuse people, but like you can do the what you call it. There's
No, but I get it. You can buy a bad service. And there's bad apples in everywhere. I get that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just, yeah, I just like the idea of being able to throw some money at it. You know,
Hey, if you've got the money to throw at it, throwing money is good if you have the money.
other than saying, "Oh, Jacob, come up, my son Jacob will quit his job and move in here and take care of me." Yeah. If those are the options, yeah, I'd rather throw some money at it and not bother anybody.
Well, I mean, so in a lot of the situations, I most of the parents I know, um, like it's not like they're necessarily living with their kids. It's oftentimes simply that their kids have power of attorney, are dealing with the finances. Especially as you get older, you become less able to deal with your own financial stuff and your own decisions, and then once it becomes a memory care issue, right? Um, Although I've also seen people like having to deal. I mean, thank God my parents are healthy. My dad's about to hit 80, I think. How old is my dad? My dad, yeah, he's about to hit 80. Um, and I mean, they're fine. I don't know if I would ever. I don't think I'm ever going to end up changing diapers or anything like that. My parents certainly don't want to become a burden like that. But yeah, in terms of like finances and stuff, uh, we we've pretty much dissolved the differences financially. Like, yeah, because yeah, so we own things in common in together, my parents and I.
Yeah, and it's good to have all that worked out. You know,
Yeah, yeah. Uh, and I tell my nephews, hey, I changed your diapers. You might end up having to change mine.
and that I know you say that jokingly, but that's a problem for me. You know what I mean? They
Well, knock
they
on
do.
wood, my nephews, they're going to be rich enough. I don't think they'll ever have to change my diapers myself themselves, and hopefully I won't become a financial burden like that. But no, honestly, the big thing, the really big thing isn't it's just having somebody who can make decisions. And you can hire an attorney to be a fiduciary. In California, they've started. I considered becoming a fiduciary, like certified fiduciaries. Um,
Where
but
they at?
say,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean the only problem is like, yeah, you got to find somebody you can trust. Uh,
Right.
Mark says, "I'm going to bed. Night, everyone. Keep opposing reality." Let me know how that works.
How, yeah. Yeah.
Mark,
Good night.
Mark, Mark is um, almost as disagreeable and contentious as I am. Um, yeah. Ultimately, my guess is, Sterling, you have a lot more money than I do, and God bless you if you do.
I don't. I probably don't. But God bless me if I don't too. Um,
Amen.
I just don't know that I'd be better off with a wife. I don't know that my future would be more stable. I don't know that any of that. So it's not something I'm looking to acquire.
With a good wife, you would.
Well, I mean, maybe, but who's to say it wouldn't even be better without a good wife?
Without a good wife, I can say no. I think the way human beings work is um, is I mean, so the classic example I give is when you're moving a couch, right? You may be very, very strong and able to move a couch by yourself, but it doesn't take very strong people for two people to move a couch, because um like working in concert together,
Yeah,
you can generally do
yeah,
um
and you can throw money at it and say, hey, hire a moving crew. You know what I mean? It still doesn't mean I need a wife or that I'd be better off with a wife. You know what I mean? I mean,
um I
I
mean, if you're spending the money to get all of the services, and this is something, I mean, in Los Angeles I see a lot, right? There's a lot of people in many different ways, and this is, I mean, going back to the whole psychology thing, a lot of people end up in therapy because they're trying to replace the friends and um the intimacy that they don't have. And look, if you've got enough money for it, you can. But it tends to be not nearly as good. So I I was one of the shelters I was working at used to be a convent, and so the psychological staff, right, the mental health staff were there to replace the nuns, NUN, right, the nuns who lived in the convent. And replacing one nun requires at least four full-time staff members, right? Because she lived there the entire time. And the staff members were not going to live there, right? So, like, and you had to have somebody at the shelter the entire time, right? And, like, even with four full-time staff members, it wasn't the same as having a person who ended up getting to know the resident, right, and helping them in a lot of ways. So, I mean, yes, we are definitely seeing a lot of people trying to um, throw money and get similar, if not better, of these services. And with enough money, you 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 can you can replace, like, those relationships. But generally, from everything I've seen, it's attempts at replacements. It's You're not actually looking at getting what you were looking for. It's hard to hire good people, just like it's hard to find a good wife. Hiring people is difficult.
yeah, yeah, no, yeah, no, it is. But I'd rather hire a house cleaner and a lawn someone to cut my lawn
Hmm.
as opposed to finding a wife who can do both. You know what I mean? Like I would like to divest.
I
Is
get
that the
it.
word? Diversify.
I get it. I get it. At the same time, like, yeah, no, look, I don't think, like, me marrying someone just so she could clean the house, I don't think um that would be a good situation. Like, yeah, I pay somebody because I'm not going to clean my house either. I pay somebody to come and do the housekeeping, and like, that's not high on my list for people to, like, like, if but at the same time, I think just we were built biologically to to live with other people and share things and do things together. Honestly, I have to tell you, for me, like, eating alone, I hate cooking for myself by myself. I hate eating alone. I really do.
Why cooking? That part I'm on board with, but like eating alone doesn't bother me. But like the shopping, the cooking, the cleaning up, just I don't like doing that. But
You don't prefer to eat with someone else?
wow, I never thought about whether I prefer it or not. I guess it just depends. It depends. If it's after work, I'm tired and I'm ready to go to sleep. I'd rather just shove food in my face and then without having a conversation and having to think about that and just go to sleep. Um, but if it's Friday night and I'm feeling chatty, yeah,
Hmm.
obviously, um, I would like someone to be there with me,
Okay.
but no, but like eating by myself, even at a restaurant or at my house, doesn't bother me at all. Some people are like that with other things, like going to the movies. I hear that one. Oh, I would never do that by myself, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
But no, if it's something I enjoy, it wouldn't bother me doing it by myself. No.
Okay. Okay. I think I am going to shut this stream down. Was there anything you wanted to say before I end the stream?
Thanks for having me.
It was great having you. Bye, Sterling.